Hey, Matt, can you hear us?
I can. Let me just try. Oh, there we go. Over my settings. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
We
hear you,
can
man.
hear you.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh, there we go.
Ah, there you are.
perfect.
There we are.
Perfect. Oh my God.
Let me clean up a little bit. Hold on.
Oh.
I was wondering what was going to be in frame.
Don't even worry about it, man.
Push some stuff around. Okay.
There you go. There you go. Oh man, that exposed brick. That is pretty awesome.
Yes, that is the age of self-taping and trying to catch their eye,
nice.
because I was told recently that casting directors don't like seeing the blue backdrop, even though they were the ones who created it. So,
Well, there you
so
go.
I figured I'd throw up a fake brick wall and try to get work that way.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, I hope it leads to much success. Many success.
Yes, me
Many
too.
much success.
Yes.
Much success.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, Matt, these are my co-hosts, Kate and Calissa,
Hi,
Hi.
nice to
Awesome.
meet you.
Nice to meet
and
you.
we are super excited to talk to you today about
Yes.
one of the best episodes of our show. So, shall we jump in?
Let's do it.
Fantastic. Well, Matt, how did you get into acting?
Uh, it took me years and years to convince my mother to allow me to do it. She was always afraid of the rejection and all that, and still to this day, I'm 32 now, and she'll still tell you straight to your face that she would rather I work at the Taco Bell down the street. Um, so yeah, but I happened to convince her to let me go to whatever place we could find. I didn't know anybody in the industry, and neither did she. So we ended up going to some company that I think was a little bit of a scam, and spent like $5,000 on commercial classes. And
Oh,
but luckily, because of that, it led to like an agent workshop, and that's how I found my first agent. And from there, it just kind of expanded, and I was fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time until I finally got the Nickelodeon show like 2 weeks before I graduated high school, which was great because I had zero plans of going to college.
Hey,
And it's been a journey ever since. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Perfect timing right there.
yeah,
So when does
you're
that
telling
happen?
me. I was in the process of applying to that Taco Bell that was down the street from my mom. So it was perfect timing. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, how did missing out on Taco Bell lead to Beacon Hills?
Well, so Beacon Hills, it was so funny because all I had ever done was comedy leading up to that point. And when I had gotten that audition, I was like, I want to just do something totally different. Like, and the character description was kind of what it ended up being, but I wanted to just go totally weird with it and different. And I had seen these casting directors before for different things, and so I was like, I'm just going to give them something they've never seen, from me at least. And it ended up working out. So it was a really cool audition process, because it was like the moment I finished the scene in the audition, they were like, yes, that's it. And I was like, cool. So it was like that was the first like dramatic thing that I ever booked.
Wow,
wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it ended up working out.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Well, you said that you did something very different for that audition, and he's such a fun, interesting character. Did you have inspirations for how you played him?
Yeah. So I can't remember if it was the breakdown. I don't think it was, but when I was in high school, my senior year of high school, we did the play Dracula. And I
Okay.
wanted I wanted to play Renfield so bad. And it was the same year that The Dark Knight came out. So I was like, this is my Joker moment. And unfortunately ended up getting a bigger role in it, and I didn't get that role. And I was like, damn, I always wanted to have like that crazy guy. And so when I went into this with the way that it had all, broken down story wise, I was like, oh, this is Renfield. Like, this is that guy. So I kind of just used what I had done in my audition back in high school as like the kind of catapulting into this and being like, okay, this is that Renfield moment that you didn't get in high school. You get to do it now. And so that my inspiration was very much like on the original Renfield character of like being like a servant to Dracula, but in this case it was not Dracula, it was something else. So
That's
Yes,
super cool. I love
that's
that.
That's really cool. Yeah.
And you still
Yeah.
consumed a bug.
I still consumed a bug. See,
Yeah.
it all worked out as it should. I
There you
wouldn't have
go.
gotten paid for it in high school, so luckily I got paid for it this time around.
Even better.
Makes everything
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
So Echo House is one of the top 15 highest rated Teen Wolf episodes on IMDb. What about that episode do you think resonated so much with viewers?
Well, I think it was, first of all, I didn't know that till you guys told me that, so that's very cool to know. But I think a lot of it, I mean, other than the fact that everybody's in love with Dylan O'Brien, including myself, I think that there was a lot of, for the demographic watching the show, and you know, we had a couple scenes in like the therapy sessions and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
it was all kind of people that were supposed to be the same age as the demographic watching. And I think it was just kind of, first of all, a scary episode that had a lot of twists and turns, but it was also something that I think the audience could relate to a bit of, like seeing these kids struggling with their own mental issues and things like that. So I think it was kind of a combination of all of that. And I can't remember if it was or not, but I think, was it the first time that Styles hooked up with Shelley Hennick's
Mhm.
character?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So that probably had a big thing to do with it as well, because I know that
Yeah,
was like
I
a
don't
long
think that
time coming.
hurt.
Yeah. So I think it had a lot of different factors, but I always, I mean, watching back, like that's still honestly like one of my favorite projects that I ever did. And I was, before this was all set up, I was just talking to my manager recently, and he was like, we need to get you back doing something like you did in Teen Wolf. Like that was like my favorite acting I've seen from you. And I was like,
Aw.
yeah, see, like I think that there was just so much about that role that was a first time for me to do things like that, that like maybe I'm part of the reason it's top 15 because I've watched it so many times.
Hey, yeah, whatever it takes.
Whatever does it, yeah.
Are there any actors from the show that you wish you could have shared scenes with?
I love Tyler. I love Tyler Posey. I wish I could have done some scenes with Tyler. You know, I like to work with as many actors as possible. So like, I wish I could have had a little moment with everybody in the show, but I've always been a huge fan of Tyler's, and that was kind of the thing where I was like, dang, I wish he could have just snuck in there for a couple seconds just so I could have seen him. But yeah, I think Tyler would have been my go-to.
Nice.
That would have been really fun to see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely fun.
Yeah,
Got all of our scenes.
yeah.
Were you aware of Teen Wolf before you were cast?
I was. I remember it being a show that I wish I had auditioned for when it was first coming out, but I think I was on a Nickelodeon show at the time, and so I didn't really get that opportunity. But then I remember it being like MTV's first huge hit
Yeah.
as far as scripted television goes. And it was kind of like, at that time, all of my friends, we were all the same age as all those actors in the show, and everybody wanted to be in this show. So it was like, it was one of those like hot ones where if you ever got the audition for that show, it was like, okay, we got to nail this because this is the demo we need to get in on. And it also was just kind of just like a fun show in general that like somebody my age at that time would have just loved to be a part of. So
Nice. Nice.
Probably a lot of the target demographic for Teen Wolf and for MTV in general were people who had just graduated from Nickelodeon demographic,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The ones who were sick of watching people slip on banana peels and wanted to see people transform into wolves. I think that was exactly the time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any fun memories from set that you'd like to share?
So I have a story for you guys that I've never told anyone before.
Oh, my
Go on.
gosh.
Yes.
And I might be like totally just tarnishing my reputation here, but I'm going to give it to you anyways.
Yes.
There's a scene in the episode where we have to distract the guards to get the keys. And I go psychotic, and I'm on top of Shelley Hennig screaming at her. And in the moment on the first take, I had never done anything like that. So I never put out that kind of aggression to somebody else and like being in the scene and doing that. And I think she knows this. I've worked with her a couple times since, but she's never mentioned it to me. And I've always been too afraid to tell her myself. But the first take we did, I got on top and I started screaming, and I put out so much pressure that I farted on her stomach. And I remember it happening, and just knowing that there's no way she didn't just feel that ripple across her belly button. And I was like devastated because I was a huge fan of hers. And I was like, I can't believe like this moment's happening and I've just broken wind on you. But we didn't say anything about it. There was never any mention of it. And like I said, like ever since then, we've never said anything about it. And I've always been like, one of these days I'm going to tell her. But I figured I'd tell you guys first.
Oh my
Hey,
God.
hey, yes,
That's
the internet
incredible.
should know everything important
Yeah.
that happens in your life.
I'm
before
honored
telling other people.
personally.
So,
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, I think that's the best story we've ever been told on this podcast.
I think so.
Great.
I think so. You have won the podcast, sir. Well
Yep.
done.
Perfect. It was worth the wait. Yeah, that was still to this day probably like one of the most embarrassing moments I've ever had on set ever. That hilariously I'm the only one who knows about. Or at least the only one who hasn't, like, I know Shelly knows, but Shelly has never mentioned it. So I just leave it alone. I let it happen.
All right, I understand.
She's
had-
professional. She moved right along.
Complete
I'm sure.
professional. So
Yeah.
yeah.
The odds that it's happened to her before are very high. I'm sure a lot of actors have farted on other actors on accident. And, you know, it's just something we roll with the punches and we move on.
Exactly.
Sure.
Absolutely. Whatever you got to tell yourself. But
Oh my God.
Brutal.
True.
so moving from one horror to another.
I was gonna say it's hard to move on from this one.
Yes. So you've worked in a number of horror films and TV series like The Purge, Paranormal Activity, and Teen Wolf. Are you a fan of the horror genre?
Yeah, it's so funny. I like growing up, my mom, I'm not sure why, but my mother let me watch, like I saw Scream 2 in theaters, which I believe I was 8 or 9 years old when that came out.
Aw.
And I remember watching Scream at home, like on repeat on a VHS, just rewind, start it over. And I think I was like 6 or 7 years old. But horror was always my favorite genre for a very, very long time. And it's funny because I've talked about horror before, and I'm like, the older films, like the horror films from the 70s, kind of 60s, 70s, like I look back at those and I don't see how they're scary. And I'm like, they don't really hold up. And I've gotten a lot of flack for that because I get it. Like they're classics. And like, I feel like in the world that we were in then, it was something that nobody had ever seen before. But like watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, if you watch that movie back, like it's a very repetitive film. Like somebody goes into the house, they get chased out and killed, and then the next person goes into the house and gets chased out. And I remember watching that in my older years and just being like, I don't understand why this was such a big thing. But I remember like The Sixth Sense, I went and saw 3 times in theaters with my mom. And I ended up having to like sleep in bed with her for 3 months because I was so terrified, but like we just kept going back and seeing it. Like it was okay. And there were other movies like The Ring and White Noise. And I always had like these weird experiences with them. When I went and saw The Ring for the first time, I woke up in the middle of the night after I saw it at 2 a.m. And for some reason, our landline, the phone was like, it was a cordless phone. It just happened to be in my room. And it was ringing at 2 a.m., which like everybody knew not to call the house past 9. So it being at 2 a.m. and I just immediately was like, oh, this is it. I'm going to die. And I answered it. And the person on the other line was like, Matthew. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, where's your mother? And I was like, and it was my aunt. And she was just super drunk calling my mom. But I was like, at the time, I was like 12 years old. And I was like, you don't understand. I just saw The Ring tonight. This is not the time to get drunk and call this house for the first time ever. But I was always a huge fan of horror and like doing paranormal and things like that. Like it was such a cool experience to see how it's made behind the camera rather than just, sitting there and watching it. And like with paranormal, it was so weird. By the time we were done with it, it was a 250-page script. Nobody knew what was going to be in it. We came back a week and a half before it went into theaters and like shot like 20 scenes. And all of those scenes are what ended up being the movie in the theater. So we shot for like 3 months only to reshoot like 2 weeks before it came out. And that's what the movie was.
Oh, wow.
So it was like such a crazy experience. Yeah. To see all that. And then doing other things, it's like, the blood that comes involved. It's just like, it's such a fun experience, but it's so emotionally draining. That's why Teen Wolf, like all of those characters, like I can't imagine those 15, 16-hour days. I couldn't imagine playing Oliver every day of the week and just having to stay in those moments and be emotional all the time, because it is just so draining. But it also is like one of the more rewarding things because you're putting everything you have into it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Great answer.
Yeah.
So our next question is a fan question. Oliver is such an eccentric character that had a lot of potential for backstory if he had been around for more than one episode. Was there any details or motives that you used to get into character for this role, or any backstory you came up with yourself for Oliver?
I think I just have to go back to the Renfield thing.
Just
I
back
think
to the
that
whole-
was, that was my sole motivation going into it. And I remember having that thought already. And then the director that week who directed that episode had brought that up and was like, this is
Oh.
kind of like a Dracula Renfield thing. And I was like, that's exactly what I was thinking. And it's like, he doesn't want to be doing these things, but he's under somebody else's control. There's nothing you can do. And it was so fun because it was the first time where I was actually being able to make real choices and like, doing the whole, like, with the mouth and like making these different choices of like what his tics are and who he is and how much like he's like this poor guy. Like if he was just a little bit more screwed on, this wouldn't be an issue. And like, even with that first scene with Dylan O'Brien, when he's introducing everybody to like him to the other people and thing, it's like, you feel for this character because he's a nice guy. He's a great guy. And so when he turns out to be, part of the villain's master plan, it was like just this heartbreaking moment of like, oh, but him and Styles could have had something. There could have been something there. But yeah, my motivation was very much just like the Renfield going into it with that and trying to figure out what my version of that character would be.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
There is a little bit of, I mean, you mentioned doing quite a bit of comedy before this, and there is a little bit of comedy in the role too, like the part that you were mentioning at the beginning where there's like, you'd be surprised how many Jesuses we have around here. Like it's very funny, but I mean, it's gallows humor. Like everyone's really
Yeah.
tense and afraid of what's going to happen. And I think that plays into what you were saying, that it's like, he seems like a nice guy. He's kind of trying to keep it light for Styles because it's his
Yeah.
first day here. And yeah, so when you realize that he's being used as a pawn, it's kind of heartbreaking.
Well, and that was the other thing that I just loved about the character and also the opportunity was the fact that prior to doing that episode, I think all of my background was like Nickelodeon acting and doing things like that. And as a Nickelodeon or Disney actor, it's very difficult to kind of break out of that afterwards because cast and directors, producers, they have a cloud over their head of what you can do. And they're like, oh, he's a broad actor. He's a loud actor. He's this thing. And so this was that role where it was like, I get to do the opposite of everything I've done, but also still get to keep some of that humor to show that like, I don't have to scream to be funny. I can be funny by just being a person. And so that way it was just such a rewarding moment to like be able to do that because of the fact that like I was so used to doing something else and I wanted to prove myself outside of it so badly. And they gave me that opportunity.
That's awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Who on the Teen Wolf set, cast or crew, would make the best alpha?
Shelly. Shelly is the alpha. Shelly's the alpha in real life, in everything she's ever been in. I say Shelly. That woman, she is the epitome of a boss ass bitch. Like she's my favorite person ever. And she's one of the rare actors who can literally do drama and comedy at the same caliber at the same time. And so watching her doing that, like I was always so intimidated by her because I was like, oh my God, you just get it. Like you just know what you're doing and it comes with ease.
She's quite awesome. She is
Yeah.
a wonderful person, amazing
I
actor.
think, yeah, you're the first one to pick her for that answer.
Yeah, I
so,
think so.
another
Well,
That's
then
right.
everybody else is fools. They don't know what they're talking about.
So I was a huge fan of the Real Neils, and I was so disappointed when it got canceled. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
That was my first experience into like network television. And it was also my first experience acting as a family rather than as friends, because usually everything I had done before was like a group of friends, whereas this was very much about a family. And it was also like I've been very, very fortunate to be a part of projects that have meaning and have a purpose. With True Jackson, it was very much all about young girl empowerment, and like you can be and do anything no matter who you are, your skin color, whatever it is, like you can be the boss of you. And then Real O'Neals was very much, for the LGBTQ community. It was such an uplifting thing for them to feel seen, and especially mixing in the religious aspect of that. It was like so many people have gone through that part of dealing with, being a part of that community and being shunned for it because of a religion. And so it was nice to be a part of that. And then now even with Lopez, it's like the Latinx community, like being able to be a part of something that is so representative of them. Like I've just, and I always end up playing these characters, which I'm so thankful for, who support that. Where like with Real O'Neals, I was playing the jock brother, which usually means he's probably going to be a dick about it and be like, oh, you're gay. That's not cool. Whereas like his character, it was the complete opposite. It was nothing but acceptance and love and support. And so that was such a nice thing, because my mother's brother was gay, and he was like part of the group who, like, he was one of the testers for the AZT drug and everything like that. And he was one of the guinea pigs for that. And
Wow.
so his story is so good, because his partner would literally smuggle it all over the border from Mexico. He would line up his cars, fully line up the doors of the cars and everything. And one time he got caught and they put him in jail, and he called somebody who was close to the president. And like 10 minutes later, they let him out. They took him back to the car, and then they let him drive over the border with all of the stuff still there.
Oh my God.
So it was just
Wow.
such a cool moment to be able to then be a representative for that community and kind of come full circle with that. So that was like, it was just a great experience. And I got so close with those people, and I got to work with some amazing actors, and there was never a dull moment. It was awesome.
That's
Now
fantastic.
I want to see like a movie about your uncle's story.
I-
That sounds
yeah,
Oh, trust me.
incredible.
Fantastic.
Oh my God.
I've been cooking it up for years, because I get my mom in these places where all of a sudden she'll just kind of start telling me stories, and I'm like, hold on, I gotta write this down. Like it's just a beautiful love story between these two guys. And like the fact that my uncle was a nurse who was diagnosed with HIV, and his first thing was to go, okay, fine, let's test everything on me and see what works and see what can happen. I don't care what it does. It was great. He was great.
So incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Please write that. I would
I
like
will.
to enjoy all of that story
I
many
will, I
times.
promise.
So, okay. 'Cause that just sounds fantastic, because normally
Yeah.
it's like, oh, they're going over the border. It's like rum runners and things like that. It's like, no, this is medicine. Like we are running AIDS medicine over the border. It's like this. I've never even heard that. And this is amazing. So, my God.
Your character is actually my favorite on the Real O'Neals, exactly for that reason of like, it was such a surprise to just have him, the jock character, be so supportive and maybe a little dumb about it at times, but just like clearly so loving towards his brother. And I just thought that was amazing to see on TV.
Yeah, I got very lucky with that.
That's wonderful. How would you compare working on Teen Wolf to something like the Santa Clarita Diet or the Purge, or even the Real O'Neals?
I think like Purge and Teen Wolf were kind of similar just in tone. The difference I think was like with Teen Wolf and Purge and things like that, like a little more time goes into the cinematography of it all, and like the setting up these beautiful shots and these like, setting the tone, and the lighting is all very important. Whereas, Santa Clarita Diet and Real O'Neals and stuff, it's like it's a very formulaic thing that's already been made. And so nobody's really trying to reinvent the wheel as far as how things are being shot. The stories are different, and there's a different tonal thing about the stories. But as far as, the tone of what happens on set, everybody's just kind of there hanging out, having a good time. Whereas like with Purge, with Paranormal, with Teen Wolf, it's like there are times where you're having a great time, and then it's like, no, now we got to get into it. Like now we're getting serious. And that was the hardest part, because I really hit it off with Dylan O'Brien, and it was so weird to like be like making a new friend, and then all of a sudden being like, okay, and now you got to smash me in the face with a wrench. Like it's like dealing with that and like being able to try to slip in and out of character. And I remember with Purge, like I had to do a crying scene. I'd never done that before, and it was so hard because it was like 6 a.m. and it was like that's the first thing up. All right, now cry. And so it's like it's a totally different muscle that you have to be able to use in acting, and it's difficult when you're not doing it a lot. So it's like all of my dramatic or horror film things kind of were spaced out in a point where like I didn't really have time to practice it. It was just kind of like, all right, let's hope for the best. You got to go in and just do everything you can. And so I would listen to music to like set the tone and try to get into this some sort of headspace that would be darker than what I'm used to. Whereas Santa Clarita Diet, Real O'Neill's like that's like my safe space. That's where I can just kind of go have fun and not worry about whether I'm doing a good job or not, because like this is what I think I was born to do, is make people laugh. And so like this is great. And unless they tell me something different, I'm doing it right. So the pressure is not nearly as bad on a sitcom or that kind of set and that kind of story, whereas it's a lot more pressure and a lot more stress goes into doing the more dramatic things, because like you want it to be right so bad.
Got it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's such an interesting, I guess, dichotomy between the two.
Mhm.
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you've talked about your love of playing a Renfield character, but if you could be part of any TV show, past or present, what would it be?
I mean, if I'm going just like straight off of like what comes to mind first, Succession is like up there, because I just love how real everything is. I love the improv aspect of it all, and like these people really, you're just kind of watching them and you're just there. And I've done such broad work in my career, and I'm still doing it, and I love doing it, but I would love to, a lot of times I feel like I'm not playing a real person. I feel like I'm playing a character. And with things like Succession, I'm like, these are real people. They are actors playing these people, but they're real. And it's very grounded, and there's nobody's stretching anything. You're just saying the words that are on the paper. But if I could do any show in general, it would be The Sopranos. That would have been a great show to be on at any age, at any time. That was like the show that got me into wanting to be in dramas to begin with, because I was like, yo,
Nice.
every character is a badass and they're terrifying and they're not even doing anything. They're just sitting there breathing heavily. And I'm like, I'm in it.
Nice. Awesome. Those are wonderful answers. Yeah.
Yeah, good picks.
Yeah. Real good picks.
If you could be any Teen Wolf creature, what would you be?
I think I would just be a wolf. I know that's probably a really boring answer, but like, to me, I always thought they were just so badass, and I loved the makeup and the effects that they did for them. And I was just like, I always wondered what I would look like that. And so I think that was like, when I read that question, I was like, I think that's just as cliche of an answer as it may be. That's what I wanted.
Nice.
No,
Yeah,
we've
it's a good answer.
Yeah.
other people have also said werewolves and
Yeah.
kind of had the same thing. Like, I know it's boring, but
Classic.
if it were boring, there wouldn't be a Teen Wolf.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. Exactly.
Fact.
So it's so cool that you got to be part of the 2017 Power Rangers movie. Were you a fan of that franchise growing up?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. And that was like a dream come true. Because at the time I knew career-wise, and also like with how I looked physically and all that, like I knew I never had a shot at being a Power Ranger then. But it was like the fact that I got to be a part of it at all, even if it was to just jerk off a bull and then go home, was just an amazing time. And it was also during a time in my life where like it was the first time I really experienced like what a hardworking actor does, because I remember I was doing Real O'Neill's and they flew me out to do one day on Power Rangers. And the next day they flew me home to host this red carpet event for the Oscars. And then the next day I flew back to do another scene, which never made the movie, or part of it didn't make the movie. And it was like this whirlwind of 5 days where I was going back and forth from Vancouver to LA, from Vancouver to LA to do different jobs. And I was like, whoa, this is the thing I always wanted to do. I always wanted to be like constantly moving. So it was awesome to be a part of, especially a movie with that, magnitude. That was a huge movie. And it was also a franchise that, like, between Power Rangers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I was like, if I can be a part of either of those, I'll be happy.
Oh my God, I'd love to see you be part of the Ninja Turtle.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Me too.
She's
That'd
a
be
big
awesome.
Ninja Turtle fan, so.
Oh, really? I had a Ninja Turtles pillow growing up that I had until I was like 14 years old. And this thing was tattered, but I literally every night I'd sleep on this pillow, and I was like, one day, and I'm still young. So one day.
One
And they're
day.
constantly making,
Yeah.
there's a new one coming out in a few
Exactly.
months. So
Yeah.
they're always
Exactly.
making those.
Yeah.
For any Stranger Things fans out there, could you tell us a bit what was like working with
Dacre?
Montgomery.
Dacre Montgomery. I've another thing I've been fortunate with is like I've gotten to work with people at their very start, and that was the coolest thing. Was like when I did True Jackson, Justin Bieber was on the episode where like he had not blown up yet, and I just remember being like, "Hey man, are you ready? Like you're gonna be pretty big." And then like 3 weeks later, he was the biggest thing in the world. And so with Dacre, it was like, I spent a little bit of time with him, and it was just so cool to see like the wide-eyed like excitement of like, dude, you're playing the Red Ranger in the Power Rangers film. Like, what is that? And he's like, well, I just got out of, and he has an Australian accent that I can't do, but he just like gotten out of some school, and like this kind of just all fell into place, and it just happened, and it was just like, this is crazy. Your career is about to be huge. And so then watching him progress throughout the years has just been awesome, because I'm like, I was there like that first day of shooting. We shot that scene. It was the first scene that was shot for the entire film. And so it was like I was there from the ground floor to see where he was starting and to know where he was going to go. And he was also just like the sweetest dude. Like he was like the nicest guy, and you could tell he knew how fortunate what he was to be there, and he wasn't going to take it for granted. And so then to see him on Stranger Things and absolutely killing that role, like I was like, yeah, that's the guy.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah. It's always great to hear someone's
Yeah.
great off screen
Yes.
and not
Yes.
just on screen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sometimes it's rare, but yes, I've been fortunate enough to where I've worked with a few very good ones.
That's awesome.
As a fan of werewolves, do you have a favorite werewolf movie?
I was thinking about this when I saw that question. I want to say American Werewolf in London, just because that was, I think, the first. That, and there was another movie called The Howling that I watched when I was a kid.
Will
Like,
loves
yes.
The Howling. You're
My favorite
magic words.
werewolf movie. I love it.
Okay,
so much.
so again, I'm pretty sure I watched that at 6 years old.
Your
and
mom. Oh my God. That movie is rough.
She prepared me for the real world, because I've always looked at horror. Like I've had so many friends be like, why do you like horror? Like, how can you watch that? I'm like, because somebody's more stressed out than I am in the real world. I like to watch somebody who's going through a much worse situation than I am in real life. And even if for those 2 hours I lose it, at least I get to go, okay, well, at least you're dealing with it and not me. And I just like, I'm glad my mom let me see those things, because I think it helped me just kind of mature quicker in a way. And probably wasn't good for me exactly, but I think that it helped. But I remember watching The Howling at like 6 years old and being absolutely petrified of it. I used to sleep. My hallway was like lined like this, and you could see the couch in the living room from the hallway. And my parents always would get upset if I would come out and not just stay in my room and stay in bed. So I would fall asleep with my eyes just to where I could see the couch, so I could see them there. And that was how I would have to fall asleep, because I was so scared that something was going to grab my leg and drag me under the bed or something. But yeah, I think like between American Werewolf in London and The Howling, I think those were, because they were like the first ones I saw, those were probably the ones that stuck with me the most.
Fantastic choices.
And that's really good.
Fantastic choices. And if you're ever having a bad day, just remember, you are not D. Wallace Stone being chased by werewolves. So
exactly,
it can always be
much, much worse.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I was also a kid who watched like horror movies way too young. Like I loved Macaulay Culkin, so my aunt rented The Good Son when I was like 8, and so it was just
dark.
The Exorcist at like 11.
Such a disturbing film, by the way.
Yeah.
And again, like I get so confused sometimes about how like Hollywood can get away with certain things, like making child Elijah Wood and child Macaulay Culkin being these characters that are going through such a horrible thing, and Macaulay Culkin like playing the scariest little child you've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like, how do you even do that? You were talking about trying to get into character and stuff. I'm like, I was 23, I think, when I did Teen Wolf. I'm like trying to get into that character. I couldn't imagine being 8, being like, okay, so I killed my sister. Like, it's just the weirdest, like the weirdest thing. But yeah, that movie got me as well. That was a disturbing movie.
Yes.
Holds up well.
Yeah.
So we have another fan question, and it goes back to something you've touched on of working with actors before they had their huge breakout. So she said that almost all of your scenes are opposite Dylan O'Brien, who had yet to branch out into his breakout role in Maze Runner and was only starting his most iconic character arc on Teen Wolf at the time you were on. Do you remember any moment from filming with him that left you impressed or hinted at what he was going to do for the rest of the season as Void Styles?
So the interesting thing with him was, him and I were kind of not similar actors, but we were in kind of a similar bunch. And he had been doing this show for a while and I had only known comedy. So this was like my first experience on a set like this. And sometimes actors can be rude and kind of not chill to be around. And especially on a drama set, it's that way. But I remember my first impression of him being like, oh, this is like the nicest dude I've ever met. And a lot of times with like when you're a regular on the show and you're dealing with a guest star who's only there for a couple days, like you don't speak to them much. You just kind of go about your day because you're busy, you're doing your thing. But he was so gracious, and like any chance he saw me by myself, he would just right there on me. And then it was also just my first time watching a peer kind of being in charge of himself on a set. And it gave me a lot of confidence leading into other sets of like, I always had this thought of like, oh, I'm so lucky to be here. And through all of this, I learned like, yes, I'm very lucky to be here, but they're just as lucky to have me. And that was kind of, he had this bravado about him of like, you knew he was going to be a star because he just like, he knew what he was doing, but he also knew that he was the actor and everybody else on this set is working harder than you are. Because as an actor, even if you're working a 15-hour day, if you count working between action and cut, you're really only working for about 45 minutes of that 15 hours. Whereas the grips, the lighting department, the writers, the producers, they are all sitting there at all times doing their job. And that's like the times I've met actors who you can tell are just fully taking this for granted and don't want to be there and don't want to memorize their lines. All this, it's always stumped me because I'm just like, you're so lucky to be here. And yeah, we're lucky to have you, but like, don't make us regret it. Like you literally like, this is everybody else is working harder than you are. The least you can do is memorize a line. And I just remember that was my first experience with a peer where I was like, see, okay, this is the guy you need to be like when you're on sets because this guy gets it. And he was just such a cool, nice, gracious person, even though I was only there for, I think 3-4 days.
It's incredibly answered.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
That's just fantastic.
Well, and even now, I mean, we never hung out after that, but anytime I'd see him at events or carpets or anything like that, he would always run right up to me and remembered my name and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the amount of people I've worked with where I'll see them literally the next day out and about, and they have no idea who I am. And I'm like, I just sat on a couch with you for 12 hours. How do you not remember me? But he was like, it was always immediate. It was always just like immediately like, Shively, what's good, dude? I'm like, God, that's great. You're just a good dude. Just a good dude.
That's wonderful to hear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just wonderful.
That's a pretty good summary of what it feels like to live in LA, because Will lived in LA for a very long time. Calissa and I lived there for 2 years, and we're from the Midwest, and we were not used to people would actually spend significant amounts of time with you and the next day have no idea who you are, and it is really weird.
Yeah. I have a problem. I'm absolutely terrible with names, and it's like it's something that it's so weird. I can memorize lines on a piece of paper in 2 minutes, but for some reason names, I've always just had such a trouble with names, and I felt like such a dick so many times when I'm like, I've hung out with you multiple times and it still is just not clicking. But it has nothing to do with the fact that like I don't like you as a person and I don't care. I don't think you're as important. Like I think we are the same. I just have a terrible time remembering names. But it is that's a very common thing of just like you can be around. That's why my last name is Shively, but everybody says Shively. And throughout my 20s, I would be like, it's Shively. It's Shively. Why is it this hard? Like I've been here a few times. You're still saying it wrong. And then I realized that like, if I'm not going to see you more than once, I don't care. Say it however you want to say it. It's just not worth it. But yeah, this is a weird town. And I'm glad you all got out because as soon as I can, I'm going to do the same. You always forget that like everybody here is from a different place. Everybody's out for themselves. And the longer I'm here, the more I realize like everybody's just so angry all the time. It's like nobody has time to just sit and just go, hey, we're lucky to be alive. Let's just be alive. Like it's like everybody's got a motive, and it can get so stressful.
Yes, it
Yeah.
can.
Definitely.
It can.
Yes, it can. Well, Matt, are there any upcoming projects you can tell us about?
Other than Lopez versus Lopez, which is on NBC now, we have our season finale coming out on Tuesday, and we're waiting to hear on a second season. I did the first episode of a show that was called Bad Monkey for Apple Plus with Vince Vaughn. It was created by Bill Lawrence, who did Scrubs and Ted Lasso and all that. I had done a pilot with him a long time ago, and he called me up one day and just was like, come out to the Florida Keys and shoot this one day on the show. And I think that's going to come out this summer. So
Nice.
if I made the cut, you'll see me in that. But other than that, we literally just wrapped our first season on Lopez last week. So it's like, I
Wow,
finally
okay.
I finally am able to come up for air for a second. So I'm going to take a trip or something.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
You should. Well,
Yeah.
it'll be well earned. Well earned.
Treat yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, treat
Thank you.
yourself.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Matt, this has been an absolute pleasure getting the chance to
Yes.
talk to you about a show we all love and an episode that many people love and a character that many people think is awesome because you were the first sort of dangly puppet of the Nagitsune, and you set the tone for kind of everything that came after that. And it was just wonderful. It's wonderful getting to talk to you.
Well, I
Yes.
really appreciate we got this worked out, and I'm glad I did it. And it's been very nice meeting you, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Thank you for
Well,
speaking
Yeah.
with us.
Thank you
It's
so
been great
much for
talking
joining
to
us.
you.
absolutely.
Of course.
And we hope you have a great rest of your day. All right.
Thank you. You as well.
All right, man.
Thank
Have a good one.
you.
Thank you.
Have a great
Bye.
Bye.
That was a great interview.
He
Yeah,
was
he
so
was great.
That
fun.
was a really
great.
good. That was a
And there-
really good interview.